Hello, good afternoon or good evening, everybody. HKIA members, AAM members. From HKIA, we have Yvonne. Hello, Yvonne. And we have our tonight's speaker, Professor
Hi, everybody. How are you?
Okay. And I'm Christine, President of Board of Directors of AAM. And tonight on the team, we have Donna, Jimmy on the
Hello.
team.
Bye.
Okay, first of all, tonight is the second CPD of the HKIA Crossover AAM Webinar Series. And this one is a hybrid mode. So we have our guests here with us tonight and also a webinar session that we have our HKIA members and AAM members and also friends across the globe. We have many of us here tonight in the room. And it's nearly been a year since we did a face-to-face CPD since COVID. So very nice to see some of our faces again, and hopefully we can cross the border again to meet our friends from Hong Kong. So tonight's CPD, there will be two sessions, around 1 hour and 15 minutes each, with a 15-minute break, and followed by a Q&A session that will run by both AAM and HKIA. So any of you who have questions or Q&A during the presentation, there is a Q&A box you can type inside. So let's not wait further and let's introduce our speakers for tonight. We have our president of our fellow membership council of AAM, Professor Carlos Marreiros, the chairman of MAA Marreiros Architectural Atelier. He is an architect, an urban planner, designer, and artist with his cutting-edge creation widely recognized and internationally published. Born in Macau, he studied in Macau, Portugal, Germany, Sweden, and China before returning to Macau in 1983. He was honored, decorated by the Macau SARS government chief executive, by two former governors of Macau, and by the President of the Republic of Portugal, and was awarded the 2019 Identity Award by the International Institute of Macau. Carlos is the founder and president of MAA Marreiros Architects, and currently he is our president of fellow membership council of AAM. Tonight's topic, I'm really looking forward to it. So let's move into our tonight's topic, Macau, a MediterrAsian city in China. How to protect, preserve, revitalize, and reuse its tangible heritage. And I believe Carlos will explore in a historical, theoretical, practical approach and case study. And before we start, I have a certificate of appreciation for Carlos.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, with the peer.
Yeah, it's the internet digital age now. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, shall I hand over to you, Carlos?
Yes, with pleasure.
Okay.
Higher.
Yeah, we'll just setting up the difficulties.
Warming up.
Warming up.
Just in a few seconds.
Move up, yeah. Okay. Can I start? Yes. Thank you. Hello, everybody. 大家好. Buenos Aires. Good evening. Bonsoir. I know there are friends from Macau, Hong Kong, as well as Portugal, Italy, Germany, and mainland China. So the bloody COVID-19, so many things, is so demanding, but we already take the mask, okay? Christine is still with the mask to show she is politically correct. Yes, yeah. I'm politically correct as well, but I took it already. So let us start. I hope you will enjoy this sharing session. As a matter of fact, I'm going to talk about Macau, a Mediterranean city in China. And why a Mediterranean city in China? Because the contribution from the West are especially Portuguese, but there are other very strong contribution from the Mediterranean Sea, like the Spanish, especially the Italian, French as well. And of course, with the experience of the north of Africa, the east coast of Africa up to India, and then to South China, all of this influence has melted the thoughts in architectural approach, topological occupation, as well as theoretic approach. So I hope you will enjoy. Oh, the pointer. Okay. Okay. In search of the soul of Macau City. But before that, let me tell you one thing. I'm very happy, honored to be here with my colleagues of Macau, of the Architects Association of Macau, as well as the Hong Kong Institute of Architects, where I have so many friends. And also my colleagues from the 90s and early millennium, I lecture the ACP. In that time, it was Stefano, Lynn De Stefano, they're responsible of this master's degree in ACP, which was, it was called architectural. Yes, please.
So our audience can see the screen.
Ah, okay.
It's our first time doing a hybrid, so we'll take improvement. Okay, let's continue.
Okay, very good. So I was telling you about, now this doesn't function, maybe this function, the pointer, no. Okay. But anyway, I was talking about ACP, Architectural Conservation Program, was a master degree organized by Hong Kong U. And I met Lynn Stefano, I think she's retired, back to the United States, and Lee Ho-in, he was then the deputy. Now he is in charge. I'm very happy. So hello to my colleagues, both professor and student. I have been meeting them during this year. Getting back to in the search of the Macau City, you know, Macau as Lisbon, as Rome, was poetically known as the city of seven hills. 七個小山嘅城市，好有詩人味嘅。And as a matter of fact, Macau has two cities in those times. What was called Ciudad Blanca or Ciudad Crista, it means white city or Christian city, and the Chinese city or Mongha. And why? The white city, because the building were quite pale, and it was confined in walls, the city wall, as all 16th centuries, 15th centuries, 17th centuries cities, it was walled. So this confined what was called the Christian city. And the rest of the peninsula of Macau, it was called Chinese city or Mongha. Now Mongha refers only of a district in the north part of Macau Peninsula. but in those times was the Chinese city called Mongha, Huangxia. And why? Because the people, the first inhabitant of Macau, were coming from Hamun, Xiamen, from Xiamen, and therefore they are missing. They are feeling the nostalgia of Hamun, Xiamen, therefore Mongha. So you can see the Bay of Praia Grande. The Bay of Praia Grande was inspired the architects of the beginning of Hong Kong. When the Hong Kong designed the so-called noble house for the Taipan and the commerce to be developed, they inspire in Praia Grande those beautiful buildings with arcades and portico that we will study deeper later. But I want to show you, you see how coherent was this facade in Praia Grande, and climbing to the 7 hills, being the hill topped by churches, chapels, pilgrim chapels, and fortress, because the preoccupation in those times to defend Macau was facing the sea, the south, not the mainland China, which were and still is on the north of the peninsula. So this picture is quite amazing. It was taken in 1844, which proved that the first photography of China was made in Macau, because this Frenchman was not famous as Thomson, as John Thomson. He was going to Guangdong to sign a treatment, a political treatment between China and the Frenchmen. And in those times, you have the daguerreotype. So you need to build a tent, a barrack, almost a house, to process the pictures in silver, jelly, on glasses. Therefore, he prepared everything in Macau before he entered to China. So when some scholars say that the photography was introduced in China through Beijing during Qihei Sishi Dashi, the empress mother, it's wrong. It was introduced by Macau. And these pictures are all kept in the Paris Museum of Photography, as well as in Macau Historical Archive. His name was Jules Itier. So 1844 was earlier than Thomson in China. Another picture showing the opposite of the Christian city, which is the inner harbor. The harbor with very lively people, in both people, but also people from the peninsula who moved to this area for buying very fresh fishery. This is 1870, so almost 30 years after, a picture of Praia Grande showing that a picture by John Thomson showing Macau 30 years after Jules Itier. And you can see here that the cathedral still have 2 domes. Macau was full of little domes because this is a typical characteristic of Macau architecture. This is another amazing picture by Thomson showing already in those times that the mixing of architectural style are so evident here. You can see this and this typically Sultan traditional Chinese style Lingnan Pai with the Fangfoqiang, divided by this Fangfoqiang walls that stop the fire. because the whole structure inside is of timber. Therefore, the gables, each portion of each house, sometime with a commercial shop on the ground floor, they were all in timber. So one getting burned with fire, the whole row of house should be destroyed. Therefore, the Chinese advance the gable normally in blue brick, I call it Changjun, advance 70 to 1 meter 30, in some big mansion even reaching 180, 1 meter 80 and 80 centimeters. And in here you can see the remaining part of this Chinese style building. You have a mixture of Renaissance balustrade, but these baluster were not in stone like in Portugal, but in terracotta coming from Sekban, a very important ceramic center in South China. And this window is clearly Western Portuguese influence, the arch of 36 degrees. And these windows, the upper part was so-called blind or louvers. It is a Portuguese influence. But here you have the mother of pearl laminate sheets, and with a design that is not always Chinese, because this was very typical in Goa. Goa in those times were belongs to the Portuguese Empire. You also have in today Sri Lanka, in those times called Ceylon. You remember Ceylon tea? Everybody remember this television commercial break. And also in Philippines, in Intramuros, you still can find this kind of timber and mother of pearl sheets. The main square of Macau, as you know, in Macau, the square design on the board of the architects start only at the end of 19th century. Before, all the square of Macau, you will see both Chinese or Portuguese. It is a result of several interactions. The guy who brings the vegetable from mainland China stopped there. The guy who brings the milk, and then the functional relation starts and become a place where people gather. And then a street start to be open because of the carriage driven by man or by animals, and so on. So this complexity of interaction, of function, design a square. Therefore, the square in Macau are normally all, until 19th century, all irregular and all generated spontaneously through human interaction, whether social or commercial. At the end, you will see Dai Bao Toi, the fortress of Monte. It was called St. Paul Hill. So the first name Dai Bao Toi was St. Paul Fortress. It was the center to control all the net system of the fortress, from the top of the hills down to the shore, now to the waterline. And in 1622, all the system were already finished. We will also study some of these examples later. So another picture showing the Dai Bao Toi. Today you cannot see. In those times, until late 80s, so it was not so far away. From any part of Macau, you can see the Tai Bao Toi. Now you can see the lotus-shaped ground casino, Lisboa, all around Macau. So a zoom to show the Tai Bao Toi. Here you can see the wave is called Largo Mar in Portuguese. It was an invention not by an erudite or an architect. It was the Colbo workers who works in Portugal and especially Lisbon that invent this called Largo Mar, means big sea, because Portuguese were people of discovery. But this is not Portuguese stone. This is a white stone called Forsek, firestone, very abundant in the south of China. And the black stone was just called Haksek, black stone, a kind of a hybrid basalt. So the row of the building before the São Lazarus, Senado Square, they were all destroyed, unfortunately, to build a fine building, but it can be in another place, the Central Post Office. And in here, this is half, in this one, the point, okay, in this one, Dr. Sin Jong San has his office, medical office, for a long time, and it is shown in the Holy House of Mercy, Omunyan Jitong Pakmakun Museum. The contract of Dr. Sun Yat-sen, a young doctor, the first Chinese to be trained as a Western doctor, and also a revolutionary. And in the other half, we see much older building. And now I would like to start a game with you. If I ask you, which of this house belong to the Westerner, Portuguese, or Macanese, and which belongs to the Chinese, maybe some of you can answer. But briefly, let me tell you. For instance, this one is clearly a building. So I go back to that one showing closer. So this one is clearly for the people which is Westerner, Portuguese, or Macanese. Why? Because all these features are more related to their culture. But amazingly, and of course, this is a neoclassical vocabulary, San Gu Tin, G details. But they always keep the composition of what I call tripartition, Sam, Sang, Sangmeng. So all the Lingnan Pai, Sultan Chinese architecture, and also widely in China, they have always a tripartition and very strong symmetry. So in here, you can understand this guy should be a Macanese, a local Portuguese, or a local English, or a local Italian, okay? In this, it's also a local, you have the tripartition, but the design is more Chinese. This small wall, it is added above the eave because the original have the eave, because the roof eave is typically Chinese. This is the eave, and the whole roof is hidden behind the platyvan. But in here, the platyvan is half transparent. You have balustrade here, but the eave is coming outside. This is typically Chinese. This format of slab, very fine granite slabs, reaching over 1 meter high. This skirting is typically of Chinese. The Portuguese way has other variation. And of course, a public jang, a public well for the usage of everybody. In this side, you can see that clearly these two are the oldest, because the fashion of arches and porticos was established in the 19th century, mainly by two guys who have created the School of Macau, Macau École. We will talk with detail about that. These are the two oldest buildings. I don't need to go inside to understand that this is local Portuguese because there is no tripartition, you see? No feng shui principle. It is two windows. And if you can see, this width is even bigger than this, and more or less the same. All the lots are almost the same. But this has a bipartition, very typical. Western people doesn't care about feng shui. They have another kind of belief, but not feng shui. And clearly, another element of a well-built house is these ventilators. They transversely ventilate the whole building, because the lots in Macau are narrow, with a front that the Chinese front in the Chinese bazaar is normally 3.4, 3 to 3.6 meter, and very long. The proportion can be 1 to 4, 1 to 5, because normally has 1 to 2 courtyard inside. So this is an element that we will see in detail. The eaves coming outside. This is another characteristic of the oldest architecture in Macau, not the arches. Move to this is amazing. The picture you cannot see very well, but clearly it's a Chinese composition, tripartition, and the beautiful Chinese sliding door, combined with louvers, door and windows. And these doors are great. Why? Because you can wide open the house and the children are not coming out, not the animal going in. So with total security and total transversal ventilation. Maybe this guy has business in the Strait of Malacca in Malaysia. Why? Because this reliefs here is a plaster relief that you can find a lot in what's so-called Baba culture in the Strait of Malacca. It is a mixture of Chinese traditional Sultan architecture with Malaysia architecture. Oh, it's going back. Why? Oh. Thank you. Okay. This is an amazing example of the Chinese bazaar. Bazaar is the now called CBD, Central Business District, the main square, the main part of the civic life. As you know, Westerner has big square, piazzas, huge open space. But the tradition in China, they don't have big space. They love the street as the Roman forum. This big square, the Roman call forum, the Greek call agora. But typically Chinese, and also in the culture, Islamic culture, They don't have a big piazza, big square. They have the street. So this drawing is amazing. It's from a book published in Macau. I recommend you to buy it. These drawings are quite naive because it was done by Felipe Emilio de Paiva. He was a lieutenant of the Maritime, and he was working in a boat serving the Portuguese Empire. And in 1903, he moved around Macau, and he felt in love with the Chinese bazaar. So he kept on painting, even doing a section of this area of Hong Kong Miu Temple, that area. So you see a very lively Macau, Chinese, the 2- and 3-story buildings from 19th century. And he is clearly stating that for the family business, it's here, okay? And then you move up, you have Chinese restaurant, private Chinese restaurant, a room, we guess from opium. He wrote here in Portuguese, from opium. And the above one, unfortunately, you cannot see well. It says reserve. Maybe it was a polite way for him to say, this is for smoking opium. So he just said reserve. Another of his drawing showing a St. Lazarus. Where is Pojayok? The St. Lazarus. In Chinese, how you call St. Lazarus Quarter? 係咩行啊？唔係嗰個地方叫做咩名啊？婆仔嗰區係有個名㗎。風塘斜巷 because it was the first, yes, precisely, leprosery of Macau, founded by the first bishop of Macau, Melchior Carneiro. So, 風塘斜巷, the building that now are reused as the School of Music, Conservatory of Macau government, belongs to Matfakok, ICM. One of the house he described, this is a low, middle class, but low, because those were social housing, Macanese family. And how can you realize that that is a Macanese family? This married woman used this traditional door. It's called door, Christian dress called door, which is influenced by Malaysia, Goa, and so on. The guy here is Macanese. You can see through his face. And the decoration, very simple. You have a staircase coming up. The staircase are from the ground floor. And in here you have the living and the room inside. All these features are typically a mix of Portuguese, Chinese, and South Asia. This is typically of this region. As you can see, rotten furniture. How can I say it in Chinese? 藤椅, which is very easy to be clean, 藤椅, yes, and also fresh, 夠涼啊, okay. But then you have a table which is much more refined with black wood, xinji, and so on. And the room and the living is divided by this timber partition, not structural, with ventilation, always with transversal ventilation, as you can see. A neoclassical door with the sliding Chinese door, as I told you, and the 2 sheets Chinese door in timber, and the original one, which was a door kind of fancy, going in, going out, 2 sheets door was added because if you open the inner timber, you keep the sliding door and you close the fence, you can have completely ventilation and 通风, and nobody can, no security, and also nobody can see you. Okay? A Chinese building adapted with very Western windows. These windows, the blind, in Portuguese is called persianas. Persianas means related to Persia, Porsi, because the Portuguese learned with the Mesopotamia, Tigris and Euphrates River, the culture was very prosperous. The Persia, Iraq, those famous countries, they control very well the temperature with the louvers. This is not a European invention. It is Persian, okay, Arabian, Islamic culture invention. And Portuguese, Italian, and other countries introduced them in Europe after they admired those civilizations. In here, you can see a Chengjun house painted with a not correct color for Chinese, this dark red. With the decades of raining, it became so light, but it was very dark. So, alien element, another alien element, it's clearly a Western window. This railing, not railing, okay, this balustrade is clearly Western, adopted by Qing Dynasty, late Qing Dynasty. And amazingly here, you have the Chinese patgua and also the laminates mother of pearl, which is clearly from India, Malaysia, and Philippines, because the Chinese use paper. Chinese produce fantastic papers from bamboo fibers, and they last long after being varnished by animal fatness and also some veneers. So, amazing example that how can such a modest, such a humble house has so many realities here. This has problems. Sometimes, you know, I move the same position and it goes to the back. Okay, San Malo, a big error in the 90s, late 90s, it was all painted in red and in gray. It's absolutely wrong. This is Westerner architects that know very little about Macau, and they are influenced by movies of Yang Zimu, you know. We see those buildings red and gray, beautiful in Fujian, even in Beijing and Shanghai, and we think that Macau is like that. No, Macau is not like that. And the proof is that if you walk around, you can still see all colors. Macau, it's amazing. You use all colors, the Chinese. So it is like St. Lazarus district. 咩街啊？咩東咩洋啊？頭先唔係 St. Lazarus。咩斜巷啊？頭先我哋講過噶，風塘斜巷。Macau ICM 文化局 painted in yellow. It's wrong. I told them several times. The mistake was done in the 90s during Portuguese time. They insist in the error. It's a mistake. Those must be colorful. It was always colorful. Green, blue, blue. red, all colors. So painting it like Senado in a time, Xi Jinping was all pastel. Pastel is Portugal, is Italy, is Spain. This is wrong. We are in Macau. Huh? Normally people say Mong Dak Tong. Yes. So you can compare these two situations. So color and colorful democracy is example of Macau. Each guy sometimes selfishly choose their color. So this is wrong, okay? But I guess 3 years ago, ICM did a consultation, Banfaco did a consultation, and people select it to be more colorful and green. It was really more green than red. So Hong Kong view, I'm going to have a very fast view on some of the characteristics of Macau, like Jivun. I was studying in Europe when I took this picture, holidays in Macau. Now, since the avian bird, the avian flu, you know, no more. I love these cages and this handcraft. So this is a fast moving to get the feeling of Macau. You see, this color is a big error. It should be all different colors and all individualizing each house. So this is an amazing thing, okay? Potat, okay? I don't talk about Potat, the Portuguese actor, because you know very well, but you don't know this. Once my wife was was in the hospital in Hong Kong, and I was watching the Hong Kong handover from the hill. You know, it was in 1997, yeah. And I was starving because I was there with my wife. I moved down to the hospital canteen or restaurant, maybe restaurant, it was big. And I found this Maxim's classic, Mamon. This is fantastic. If you today ask some Macanese what is Mamon, they don't know. Mamon come from the Portuguese mamar. When the child is drinking the breast milk of the mama is mamar, because woman breast is mama. So Mamon is a guy who suck a lot of milk from the mother. It means a guy who loves to eat. So the area confining around St. Paul to St. Antonio Church, Fa Bong Miu, okay? That is the area of the Mamons. Why? It was quite far away from the city center, which were more or less in St. Lawrence Church, Rua Central. So that was a place for pilgrim. People go there because St. Antonio was a very good saint for marrying your daughters. So a lot of parents go there, put flowers and prayers given to St. Antonio to marry their daughters. So they organize pilgrim. And when there was pilgrim, there was fair, like now in the countryside, selling things. And of course, eating. So it was so good to eat that it's called a Mamon area. And Maxims use this, and this bread is inspired in Pão de Ló in Portugal. In Japan, they have, you know, right? Castella, sometimes Castera, very famous egg bread. It's a Portuguese Pão de Ló. So we move forward. Oh, we are going back again. So the small alley And of course, I don't know what is written in Chinese. And Macau is all about happiness, which is fantastic. Yes. This is the Mandarin House, Jiankun Daiyok. We will talk about that later. The Protestant Cemetery, a typical 100 years old, so not very old, Chinese pharmacy. Macau has a quintessence, has another Macau on the top of the building, but I'm not going to talk about that. It is a very interesting phenomenon. This is amazing in Colwan. Travessa da República is amazing because people think that Colwan was used by Portuguese ever since. No, it has 100 years only. So when there are people talking about Portuguese culture in Colwan, it's ridiculous. It's after the Republic of Portugal. They say because they don't know. It's only after 1010. Beautiful ad hoc architecture without architect, but in a clever way with beautiful colors, beautiful. You can still find it. And this was very simple monuments to celebrate some dates in Macau. This was in front of the Liceo. Amazing. The granite sculpture come from Portugal, but then this is used with the simple mosaic and not Marreiros, this is the very current, and this is the faucet. So this was the pattern. The Portuguese discover a place in Africa or Brazil, they put one of these, you know. This is a new interpretation. Okay, and we finished this, In Search of the Soul with Macau with the most touching image for me in Macau. Close to a cathedral, which is beautiful elsewhere in the world. If you happen to be in Italy, Spain, Portugal, Germany, England, and you look at the cathedral, you will see a lot of beautiful cathedral. But St. Paul Cathedral is not only beautiful in Macau or in Asia. If you build it, put it elsewhere, in any capital of the world, it is still beautiful. It's very beautiful. And because it is in ruins, it's even more beautiful. You see the sky on the top of this ruin. And then a small brother, a Chinese altar, the San La Jia Miu, a temple built in 1888. With only 4 meters, 51 centimeter of width and 8.4 meters long, so small, invade the compound of the former cathedral and stand by, stick in the part of the old city wall. As you can see, this doesn't belong to the good wall. This is the secondary lane of city walls. So it was smaller and not so strong, but protect this this little village here. So it is fantastic to look at a place where a strong Renaissance, Mannerist, neo-Baroque, okay, coming to Baroque facade with Ling Nam Pai Buddhist Taoist temple and the wall. And the walls in Macau didn't separate people or places. They were the linkage of people. Amazing. So this is one of my favorite image of Macau. So the back, and just to show you, because normally people don't have the opportunity to move up. So you can see this stone steel, with the face, somebody says that it was from Carlos Spinola, the Jesuit priest. Jesuit means Company of Jesus, who have designed this fantastic church. The others say it was Vignola, the superior of the Company of Jesus in Macau. Whatever, it doesn't matter. At least architects suffer but have the glory to have a portrait. Okay? And the amazing thing, people normally don't realize, the gargoyles, in those times, people, for the drainage of the building, they put some medieval monster. If you see Notre Dame in Paris, they have monster. In Macau, it's so sweet. Chinese lions, protected lions, you know, smiling. So they are the drainage in the pipe system, which is very amazing. So we move forward. Okay, we will talk about before and after 1557. 1557 is the year that the historian, both from Western and Asian, particularly Portuguese and Chinese, accept as the day of the foundation of Macau. Macau, the city of the name of God, founded by a trader, not a navigator, not a conqueror, a trader called Jorge Alvarez, No Valley. And he and his brother and his son is today still in China. They rest in Linpo, where they trade. And they were in Macau since the early 16th century. But Macau was established formally in this time. So I share with you 8 characteristics of the Sultan Chinese architecture. Location plus spatial organization determined by Feng Shui. Chinese select a place where theoretically, if you have a mountain in the back to protect your backs, a river or the water in the front, fluent to contact other people. In those times, you don't have street, but also the Sultan says that the water sui sounds like money. And if the money is flowing, its cash flow is fantastic. And on your right, you have a little wood or a forest is good because protect from the winter, northern wind, and also Saiche, the western, the sunset, which is very hot. And on the east, if you have just some plantation, not very high, it will be a fantastic settlement because the sun is rising in the east every day for everybody. So for the Westerner, oh, timer, cannot move, why? Yes, yes, okay, thank you. So you have magical hands, I don't, you see. This is Kunyam Mill. Kunyam Mill was, the first construction was in Yuan Dynasty, 1274 to 1368. But the present style is 1627. Qianlong, all the temple in Macau, the tourist guide sometimes bluff. We have to be very careful, say, no, this is not Ming Dynasty. It started in the Ming Dynasty, but it was a simple altar. Then it changed to what we see today. It's normally Qianlong Emperor and after it. Some of them are only 19th century, okay? So this is example of Kunyam Mill. As you can see, the symmetry, absolute symmetry is the second characteristic. Extremely rigid symmetry in the plant, but also in the elevation, as you can see. These three row of pavilion are separated by a service corridor after the courtyard. So partition 1, 2, 3 in the plan. In the main facade, which protect for this big courtyard, and then a platform with staircase, and then the temple itself. As you can see, the main facade of Kunyamil, it's also a tripartition. Three for the Chinese are very important. Now maybe 8 is more important because the Chinese became more materialistic. Before they want fortune, you know, 8 fa translate to Portuguese or English fortune. It is the same meaning that the old Roman give to fortuna, means luck, health, and prosperity. But in the south, fatat is only very materialistic. But in the Chinese tradition, it's 3, 生命. So you see, the center, you always have this. This is the main facade. 1, 2, 3. Behind, and then 1, 2, 3. And it is a multiple of these 3 that happens in all architecture in this area, and particularly in Macau. So the canopy with this carving, always the architrave is in good wood, engraved and very colorful relief, showing Chinese mythological scenes or story regarding goddess and kings. This is all glazed terracotta from Sekban, beautifully molded. Granite normally is not so common because the Chinese, it's a world famous carpenter. It's not a world famous masonry. So it's not so common. Also the Cheng Fa sculpture, not Cheng Fa, brick sculpture, Cheng Fa Jun Tiu Hak, which is very easy to work. So another feature that characterized the Lingnam Pai. The other sides. And as you know, in Song Dynasty, the Ministry of Public Works published in 1103, 1,000 years ago, what was called the Yang Zhao Fa Shi, which be translated is building standard. During Qing Dynasty in 1734, a second manual was published by the Ministry of Public Works, and it called it, I don't know if this is the correct pronunciation, 公不工程说法治理, which means engineering manual for the board of work, which all the dimensions are decided by these 2 manuals. Scholar Liang Shicheng, the famous architect, studied this very strong, and he was in Shanghai, Beijing, and the whole China, and he was in MIT, I think, MIT or Harvard, MIT. And then he has published all the drawings, and he considered that from the year 1000, so after Song, up to now, he called it the period of vigor 勁啊，好大力。And the time between 1,400 years up to 1900, the period of rigidity,好硬啊. Therefore, the scholar says the Chinese architecture is very rigid. In Europe, in 70 years, you have from pre-impressionism to modernism, with several approaches, always changing, a lot of creativity. But Chinese architecture, you are not allowed to be creative. You follow the rules. So Liang Shishen call it rigid period. In Macau, hopefully, this rigid period is always not respected by the locals, because they don't know, it's ignorance, because they don't care, because they have their own belief, which is fantastic. And this happened in Chinese Southern architecture in Macau, as well as in the Portuguese or Western that you will see. So the structures of the Lingnam Pai style to build the roof, we will see in detail. So you can see the red, it's the pavilion, covered pavilion, and the yellow are the open space, the patios, the courtyards. Patio is, as a matter of fact, is a Portuguese name, also used by Spanish and Italian, not courtyard. Patio, Americans translated for patio because of the Mexican influence, and hopefully it's correct. So you have a patio, a courtyard, articulate with a pavilion. You cannot call this a house because it's open. So it's a pavilion. And the Chinese architecture has this rigidity, but the brilliant Chinese architect cannot run out from the rules. But if he managed well the proportion of this pavilion, the void and the build, the void and the build, the light and the shadow, the Chinese architecture will be brilliant. It is the Lao Tzu principle. He stated in Tao Te Ching, man build walls in the space, but they don't live in the walls inside. They live in the void organized by walls. This is beautiful. Another thing, Lao Tzu also, Taoism, the wheel that move a car, what is important is the emptiness, the void around the wheel, not the wheel itself. Or a spoon, to eat in a spoon, what is important is not the spoon, is the void that the spoon provides to you to take the soup. This is brilliant. So Chinese architecture used this principle, and of course Western architecture afterwards in the last 100 years use these too. Some of them don't know how to explain, but that is the principle. So the same, all the yin-yang principle here, the centrality, oh, this is always going back, my goodness. Why this? Ah, try both ways. Back. Okay. So those 1, 2, 3, a lot of this was showing all the partition. Even in one of these span, you have 3 partition as well. Okay. So as you can see, even in such a small, you have the 2 pillars to do the 3 partition. You come here, you have the two void and the screen, three partition. Here you have the staircase, the pure cavity, and the partition, and so on and so on. So the principle of yin-yang, as you can see, even in a small pavilion. Another example is Lin Feng Mill, started in 1592, but this version is from 1876. So you can see again what I told you about the extreme rigid centrality. This was the original part. Okay, the tripartition. And then this was added afterwards. So clearly the tripartition. And here you can see 1, 2, 3. But this one in the middle is on his way, use the tripartition. The topping of the roof, tripartition. And even this element, it's a tripartition. 1, 2, 3. It's amazing. If you find one in Macau that is not a tripartition, I give you a reward. And even this, if you realize it's a tripartition, 1, 2, 3. Hong Kong Mill, quite humble temple, but very famous in the so-called Chinese bazaar, the CPD of the Chinese city in the last 200 years. I don't need to repeat the tripartition. All this, the centrality and so on, all these are here. Beautiful, very simple, granite. Of course, about the characteristic, I didn't talk about unity, but you can find vocabulary. I have been talking about construction system. I will go on speaking, and techniques and materials. Okay, even in such a small temple like Tai Bong Mill, you see the principle of tripartition. But because it is so, the width is so narrow, you have the Fang Fao Chao organizing the centrality, and you have 1, 2, 3. Then again this. And if you build something in the other side, you have to build another there. Always keeping the tripartition. Okay, talking about vocabulary, one of the most amazing things in Chinese architecture are the roof. Some of them like a bamboo structure that is suffering of fatigue and become curved because of the way of the tile, or dragonizing gable walls to support the roof with geometrizations of clouds and other reference. So when the construction has budget, you fill the eaves and the cement, the mortar, over the tile with glazed terracotta from Sekwan. If you don't, you just leave the cement as it is. So the carpentry is great in Chinese architecture, where the columns based on granite base reach up the sky, and from the mother beam descend to other secondary beam. And in the canopies, it is moving out situation of the roof with a very ingenious way of doing this cantilever, half cantilever out. I mentioned several times the terracotta. This is the service corridor linking two rows of several pavilions interchanged with patios. So the beautiful brick sculpture, this is in Lin Phong Mill, Macau Lin Phong Mill showcased the best brick sculpture. The call in Bosso, the old side, this is plaster high relief. They have some cây chải mỏng. Okay, so cây chải mỏng, the wire net to give the volume, and it's plaster. This is also a Chinese are master in doing this kind of things. I mentioned the column, normally in good timber, but always protected by stone base because of humidity and also insects and rats to eat or to destroy the wood. This is quite rare in Macau because granite, this is a pair of big granite slab, which is quite rare in Macau because, as I said, Chinese are good carpenters and not great masonry. So works in granite, beautiful in Ama Temple with the Phúc, 有福係嘛？大家都係咁話啦。媽閣廟。I have a signal by my dear Christine that the time for eating a sandwich, and especially me, I need to smoke a cigarette. I'm a bad boy. I'm a bad man. Don't follow my example. But I would like to finish rapidly this. Okay, it is almost. So the Ma Kok Mill, it's a strange case in Macau, Ama Temple, because normally Chinese choose a flat place close to the water or on the top of the mountain, but flat. Here, no, small place. The several altars climbs the little hill up to the top, which make it very interesting typology of Lingnan Pai. The scholar should study more. I have written about this, and it is published in Italy. Huh? We are going back again. Irritating this mouse. So we have the the Mandarin house. I'm very happy because I was linked to this since the 80s to protect it. It took so many, 5 or 6 governors to be convinced that this was to be safeguarded. And fortunately, it was safeguarded very well, and it is open to the public. These are pictures before the conservation. It came to ruins. Unfortunately, it's a beautiful place. So I show you the pictures before and when it was under restoration. Very carefully cover all the areas secured. They have the help of Hong Kong U, also Guangdong Department, archaeologists all over were there, and this is fantastic. So this I showed you before, because it is late, I'm not talking. Finally, another typical feature of Chinese architecture, we talk about domestic architecture, home. We talk about temples. We have to talk about also the street public, street altar. Small altar normally serving an alley. An alley in Macau called patio, but it's wrong. In Portuguese, it's called beco. Okay, an alley without exit in Portuguese, but in Macau they call it patio because the Chinese has another character for that. Another example of a house, lou ga, okay, tripartition. Of course, there are a lot of features here that is lost. This masonry is fantastically carved. Rua da Sé, number 7. So everything I talked about, the tripartition, centrality, and so on, it's here. Another typical which is losing in Macau, pawn shop, Prestamis Tower. Pawn shop with its narrow windows, because these were the bank. In those times, this served as watching point, like the Diu Lao in Kaiping, Diu Lao. It's a kind, so it's a watching tower, all the goods, and they even issue money called talude, a paper like a check, you know. They were allowed by the government, Portuguese government, to issue their own money. They play important. This was before a fire. I was there, luckily or unfortunately. Some remaining buildings, some already destroyed. You see, the patio, this is behind St. Paul, Calçada de São Paulo, and behind the Languila. They are building still very good, but like that. So if go on 1, 2, 3 years, it is completely destroyed, you know. This is already destroyed, was Yamcha. This is Daxing On, everybody knows. The beautiful tower. But now it's not open to people. It was, unfortunately, the pharmacy, the typical interior decoration. And after 1557, we see in a while, okay? Thank you.
So all materials presented are the property of the respective author. So to Professor Karush Maharish, no part of these works might be produced in whole or in part in any manner without the prior consent of the author. In this case, Professor Karush Maharish. 咁版權聲明咧，就希望大家就尊重翻著作人若龍則師，就唔好擅自上載、傳播、使用或者修改啦。Okay, so shall we get back to your presentation?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
Okay. Okay, so all of us, we have our fresh air. Our AAM have a fantastic little garden here. So we were talking about before 1557. Now we go to so cannot, no problem. I tried the mouth here. Okay. Okay, so I will not, because the time is running short, I cannot go with detail for all of this, but St. Paul ruins, I will not talk about that because there's no time, okay? So I show you a few pictures and we go forward. St. Dominic Church, this is a real old building, 1550, but its version, it's neoclassical from early 19th century. As all the plan for Jesuit, the Jesuit, they were very clever. They followed the Chinese system of tripartition. All of their church has the plan with the tripartition temple, tripartition principle. And the main altar is served by a main nave for the worship of God. And the alley, these two alley, serve the purpose of teaching. Even in St. Paul ruins, the principle established in the plan that you can see even today. The priests teach Latin and other discipline in this alley, remaining the central access for worship. So St. Dominic Church, one of the most beautiful church in Macau, all plaster with this special perforated timber roof, which you don't find in Europe, in Portugal. You find similar in Goa Church and in Brazil. This was for ventilation and to keep the timber out of the termites. St. Joseph Church, built start the construction in 1746. It lasts until 1758 to be built. And then in the after World War II, it was destroyed by this plaster covering the masonry work and the plaster paint with lime paints. The church in Macau after the World War II up to the 60s was characterized by a terrible bad taste. And they think that covering with this artificial imitating granite, so-called Shanghai plaster, because it was very Shanghai Peitong, it was very fashionable in Shanghai, and putting these horrible glass and iron louvers, they can keep the church everlasting. Fortunately, it is all destroyed, and after renovation, it looks like that. Of course, this is a bad solution. You can use some epoxy showing the original color, but in Macau, in 2 years, this is fade out and it become beautiful. The courtyard, this is quite a Baroque building. So the main facade, which is not facing the street, and the granite monumental staircase up to another street. This was the first dome ever built in China. St. Agustin, another beautiful church. St. Lawrence. In St. Lawrence, this renewal was done by José Tomás de Aquino, the founder of School of Macau, and he introduced this element, which is bioclimatic for Macau, that you cannot find, for instance, in the church built in Hong Kong as the English colony, Singapore, or even Malacca. They don't have this knowledge of the climate approach. The cathedral destroyed by the bad taste of church, as I mentioned before, with the Shanghai plaster, and losing the dome. that originally you saw in John Thompson picture. The inside is very uncharacteristic. And now they put other colors. It is even worse. The colors are not correct, and all the detail of the altar, unfortunately, are ugly and nouveau riche. Nouveau riche is the French word to refer to those you exhibit a lot of jewelry, okay, the new rich, you know. So you see the feature is absolutely wrong. I know some of our friends and colleagues from Manfaco, Department of Heritage, are listening to me right now. This must be stopped. The bad taste coming to Macau with silver and gold shining thing has nothing with the tradition of Macau religious architecture. Agia, another typology. The church is a pilgrim area, quite far away from the center, and it was built in 1622. So the last year of the Dutch invasion of Macau. Macau was so many English and Dutch, French wants to conquer Macau because of its neuralgic, strategic area in the commerce with the Far East. And the lighthouse is more recent, 1865. Beautiful architecture by engineers, so there's no architect here. And I love the good architecture by engineers, by civil engineer. Very rationalized, very minimalistic and efficient. Some other features. Fortress, it's also one of the typical of Portuguese architecture. Church and fortress. These fortress, these walls are very strong. They are built with chunambo. And what is chunambo in Portuguese? It is a westernized word, a Portuguesized word, meaning shunam. Shunam, it's a Malay word saying that, describing the technique, which is you use cement with mud and a lot of oyster powder. You make the calcification of the oyster, you mix with the mud or the earth, a very small cutted dry straw, and you have to put it layer by layer. If you go to St. Paul, you will see the remaining of these techniques there, and you can see layer by layer and then pressure, doing a lot of pressure. And of course, you have to build a wooden box, you know. Pressure, another layer, pressure, another layer. And also you add melgaço. What is melgaço? When you use the sugar cane to make the juice, at the end, to make the, sorry, not the juice, to make the sugar, at the end, the machine has some very dark, dirty, and strong sugar, crystallized already. This is used to reinforce the strength of the walls. For instance, in the stucco in Europe, the white stucco you see inside the house, they are built not in masonry wall, but in taipa in Portuguese. It means it is a wooden structure with stripes of light timber or wood, and then cover with this stucco, the stucco. And this stucco, to make it harder, you add the melgaço, okay? So fortress, taipau dominating the wall, a small one, bombardo. Okay, this is the oldest civil Portuguese architecture of Macau. Unfortunately, it is destroyed. This is the street to go to St. Paul. As you see, Macau was very slopey. You have always the granite platform, And this composition is typically of the restoration of Portugal. Portugal were under Spanish governance during 60 years until 1640. There's an author from Hong Kong, Mr. Vaughan, in his thesis, he considered this from the 17th century. I don't think so, but for sure, it is of the early 18th century. It means 1700. I visited this when I was small because my grandfather was the chairman of a charity association. I go with him to my grandfather give present, how can I say, gifts, food, and I wander around. All has patios, fantastic, very classic design, simple but beautiful. And all of these were granite strong, you know. This you can find today, partially destroyed. Some I did some also here, but the idea is there. Very classic, no tripartition, because it is typically Portuguese or Mecchanese to organize. The former still, now it's the Consulate General of Portugal. This is San Rafael Hospital. You see the classicism, and this is the principle of Renaissance. The first one, strong and with stripe, can be more rustic, lighter and even lighting, to give the image of ascension, going upward. Dom Pedro V Theatre, Chitong, the former Xi Jinping, right? It's the same. Originally 1784, but this version is 1904 with some addition in 1936. The side facade, you will see some elements of Shanghai plaster and not pure granite, the real granite. The Municipal Library, beautiful. This is inspired in Portugal, a famous World Heritage convent and library, National Library of Mafra. But this is a small case. The original design of these are in the Historic Archive of Macau. Beautiful. So some of the examples. So the Farmácia Popular before, you can see it was pink. This was white. If you go there, it is all in yellow, which is completely wrong. Very rare now. You know, the palette of colors in Macau was typically yellow, white, the walls, with light or dark brown in the windows, or green. And then you have all white with green windows, or like this, gray. Then you have red and white, yellow and red, like in Tapsec. Then you have green and white, and also very typical, but now people, because they don't know, they don't do it. Blue and white. Blue and white is very beautiful, but not the Lombok blue. Huh? It's a dark blue. Very, very nice. So architecture between 1840 up to 1899. What I call it, Escola de Macau, Macau School. All the time, Macau mixed architecture, because you have Portuguese here thinking about Portugal, but you don't have the limestone and you don't have the manpower. So you have an architect in those times, can be a military or a priest. He knows something about architecture, doesn't know everything. He draw the main plans and facade and leave the decision to the local craftsman. Okay, so there was always a mixture of features, architectural vocabulary, as well as techniques, but in a spontaneous way. The two guys who study this One study in Portugal, José Tomás de Aquino, Alexandrino de Melo, also known as Barão Cercal, study in England. And their architecture reflects this. But both were, in a conscient way, adapting the best of the Main Empire with the best of Portugal. And of course, some other influence of Italian and Europe. But don't be afraid to affirm that Macau Western architecture is Portuguese, because you find the same method in Macau, in Goa, India, the former colony of Macau, in Brazil, whole Brazil, and also in less, but in Africa. So talking about the generalistic colonial architecture is ridiculous. Colonial is everything that is not done by us, we the real inhabitant of Macau. This is not enough. We have to be more detailed and more precise. So 9 basic architectural elements. Okay, this is Puijay. First, independently of their functional brief, development, there are 2 types of space organization. More Portuguese, more Western, or Cristão. Cristão, it's the word that you have in Malacca, in south of Japan, to consider what is Christian. Christian, what was brought by the Portuguese. And more Chinese, almost totally Chinese, but never completely Chinese. So in Macau, you will not find completely Portuguese architecture, neither completely Chinese architecture. They are always adaptation. So an example of more Portuguese architecture, this is the house of Chanji in the top of São Lázaro Square. You have a very neoclassical facade. It's not very old, 1917, with a hall. Then you have the living room, the dining room, the rooms, and then outside of the house, it was afterwards stick. But the kitchen was, and the main WC, the toilet, were always outside the main body of the main building. It is a characteristic, okay? A drawing by Wei Meng in the inside were very beautiful. I know the daughter, Mrs. Rosa, she has inherited all this building from his father. So I'm talking about this. And this belonged to them, but it is later. Also Chenji. So before restoration, I restore it. I have this pleasure. Me and Sam Machado in '86, we won the competition. This is another interesting house, Lo Go Horning House. It's a vibrant neoclassical house, but a neoclassical house full of porticos or gallery. Don't call this arcade. It's wrong. This is porticos. Okay, the correct name. Now everybody uses it's Italian. In Portuguese, it's porticos, the same. So this device for controlling the temperature. He did this before and then at this. And the house, the plan is amazingly linked by bridges and void, main void, okay? He was a rich man. So from the main door, you enter like that. So this is the main door. You see the porticos protecting the house from the exposition of the sun. And inside, it is amazingly beautiful, both Chinese with a lot of Western elements. This is a detail in Lo Gao Fa Ying showing the same. The Chinese way reproduced not in wood, exotic wood, but in cast iron. A courtyard with beautiful elements. It is almost all Chinese, but never completely Chinese. Okay, second example, platform. Second characteristic. All the well-built house has a platform. Why? Two reasons. First, secondary reason, Macau is very slopey. But then in a flat place, why they use the platform? Because of humidity. Platform in Chinese is called Toi Gei. This Toi Gei or platform in Portuguese can be called Soco, because it isolates the direct contact with the humidity. So through capillarity, it's not reaching the ground floor and upper floor, because all the floor and the beams were built in timber, mocha. Okay, but this was built in granite, or if you have less money, you do it with brick. Normally, it has up to 1 meter, 1.3 meters, because before there were some higher, and then the owner put the schools to live downstairs, which was very cruel. So the government prohibited to make big, okay, and raise it down to 1.3 meters. And then this platform need to be ventilated. So transversal ventilation to keep the thing dry. And because of rats, they have to add the net here. So this one is Bella Vista. You see, this is very high. It is for the last century. It was allowed, and then cut to less than half, not to the owner to put the people living there. Even in a Sopli close to Apojang, you can see the platform here. Okay, this very humble house, they also raise a little. This is a picture of the late 70s. Okay, from the slope to the platform. Three, loggias or porticos. So all the houses in Macau are protected by this element, which wrongly call arcades or arcadas. This is porticos or loggias. You can have a single portico with 2 columns, or you can have 400 of them. It is porticos. So you have an example of the Moorish barracks, very big porticos with huge balconies, even to put the cannons for defending the port. To smaller, this is huge, as you can see. This is huge. This is huge because of their functionality. This is huge also. Also huge, Rich School. This is also huge. To smaller as the Tapsia. All those buildings in Tapsia were residential. So this is around 1.5 meters. Normally they have 1 meter and 0.30, but this can be only 1 meter. This is Xinzhongshan house, but then big again like here. This is a very important feature of Macau. All those are covered, but this was all open, like Holy House of Mercy and Jitong. before was all like that. This you can call an arcade because it's public, but it is still a loggia or a portico. And this was not completely full cover, you know. Also porticos, so many styles of porticos. Porticos, you have this one, and even moving up for the important guy to be here. This was the house of an architect, you know. Architects were, yes, Tomás Barão Surcal, so Alexandrino de Melo, the second name, it was his house, he was a rich man. And this was the house of an architect, José Tomás d'Aquino. He designed that, you see. Good to be architect 150 years ago. Not now, not now. Ko Honeng, another house of the Ko Honeng, in Praia Grande, built in 1921, so quite recent, precisely now 99 years. It's also a very good example of West and East meeting together inside. A detail which is amazing. You will not find this in Europe. You have a loggia and then a balcony inside the loggia. This is typically a tropical phenomenon. So amazing balconies with this rhythm, already done. This is more recent, already done in reinforced concrete. This is to show, you see how, this is all loggias. You see this? They are protected by windows and curtains and stores, but this is all gallery. And you see the dome, little dome, topping the cathedral. So 4 and 5 elements, balustrade and platiband and cornice. So you have the platiband, I talk about that. This is a Renaissance element, so 16th century. Before all the houses, the roof comes out with the edges, okay? And then the water, the rainy water run out. And during mainly Renaissance, they like to add this platiband, whether they are semi-open or completely closed. The cornice, all the neoclassical architecture of Macau, you have cornice. This is quite Hellenistic, but you can have of other design. And this is the ventilator. I will talk about that. So the balustrade, this house is very well constructed. Chanji, José Chan is the house. And because he has money, the roof has 6 layers of tiles. The poor house has only 1 layer of tile. Roof and ventilators, the 6 characteristic. So the roof, I already mentioned, this is very inclined to keep the water to be driven to the drainage all around the perimeter of the house, and at least 4 piping for the water, running water to reach the soil. A good house has ventilation. This is slight movement of these cylinders, make it upper for ventilation, because they use the false ceiling, okay? Which is a characteristic of Portuguese architecture. Chinese never use false ceiling. In Jenga diode, the false ceiling is clearly Portuguese influence. If you realize, Chinese never use false ceiling. And this also gives some lightening. So the roof were all pitch roof, no flat terrace. So I used to say that one of the town planner in Macau was the white termite, Why? It changed the profile, the skylight of the city, because all the pitch roof were built in timber, and it can last 10 years, 15 years, they fall down, because the white termite eat. So the roof of Macau, you see all the picture up to 1900, like that, and then become flat. Why? With the introduction of the reinforced concrete. Cheaper, and you can have a terrace, and the Chinese are very happy. Wow, 有一個 terrace, 有個天棚，又可以耍太極，又可以瞓覺，又可以冇錯。And the Portuguese were happy too. 佢哋鍾意曬太陽啊嘛。Oh, we don't have a good beach here. We go to the terrace. So a characteristic is always pitch roof. Okay. Whether Portuguese or Chinese, never a flat terrace. This is a 100-year phenomenon. So a well done cover, you see the richness of this size with ventilations, sometimes lightning. In this case, it's not so huge. This is the Peter V Theatre. You have this situation I showed you before, for ventilation and for lighting. The ventilator is normally in cast iron, or in plaster. So this ventilates the whole house. And this building was destroyed in Long Song Kai. It was blue, very beautiful blue and white. You can see in this building, so Portuguese, but the ventilators are in the shape of China, the coins, the Chinese coin. And people say that Macau always have this toponymical with the blue and white. It's completely wrong. You see, the example is here. The inside false ceiling covering the roof. It's quite a beautiful example in Macau, but not only in Macau. It is a tropical phenomenon of this area. You find it in Goa, but also Malacca. So the timber are filled in these models, and this is not decoration. People think it's decoration. No, it is hole for the ventilation of the roof. Otherwise, this will be full of water, drop water. Another example, the first one was San Antonio. You have to visit San Antonio. They did bad decoration, but it's a beautiful church. This is St. Agustin. And this was the most spectacular roof in Macau. It was Lokok Fantim, Lokok Chatim. This is typically you find in Thailand, especially. It is open. You can open it for the light and ventilation. You can half close it for the night, no mosquitoes. This unfortunately was destroyed because it was safe, but without security, so people stole all of it. I should stole one of these pieces, and I will afterwards donate to the government. But I didn't. I was stupid. If this happens again, I stole, because the guy goes there to take drugs, burn it, to hit himself or sell it, unfortunately. So I regret not to have stolen that. So even the Portuguese houses the roof are built in Lingnam style. All the churches, the government palace and so on. So you have the master beam, other beams. These are the gables, normally blind, is structural. And then you lay on this circular rules in wood. Normally they use before the camphor, not to be eaten by the termite. And then you put this on this timber, you lay the tiles, and normally you paint it in white. No false ceiling. This is in this downstairs. They are false ceiling because this was commercial houses to be sold to Chinese and Portuguese. But the upper floor, no false ceiling. They was in Rua do Campo. Front facade and back facade. Why? This is typically of Macau. You have a quite rhythmic and historic facade in the front and much poorer in the back, because Chinese say you have to have face, you have to show your richness. So the main entrance, the main facade is much more richer than the back. You don't see so much in Europe like that. Front garden and back garden. Okay, there is Tang Dynasty proverb which says that a good Chinese, if he is rich, he always have hot tea and water for the traveler to clean the hands and kill the thirst. This is beautiful. Macau, Chinese love to treat well the people. It's a characteristic of Macau Chinese. Portuguese also like to be nice to people. So the garden being nice in the front, it's for the owner to have fun, to see beautiful trees, beautiful flower, and smell beautiful perfume. And also a way to welcome traveler, visitors. And all the garden in Macau were this high, not fancy. The fence only start to be built after the invasion of Nanking by the Japanese. So a lot of refugees come to Macau. So people build higher fancy and put some lanes, you know, and then even cover that during the World War II. And then the back garden, okay, this is the front garden, and the back garden is a functional garden. Why? In this, the Macanese especially, they put not beautiful trees, but trees for fruits. And they plant onion, garlic, and lettuce and other vegetables for eating. So this is a poetical characteristic, but typical of Macanese architecture, Portuguese architecture of Macau. You have a front garden to feed your soul, your eyes, beautiful garden. And you have a functional garden at the rear to feed your stomach. So that Macau cuisine is so famous. Okay, 9, the last one, being sweetly bizarre. The best word for in Chinese for bizarre is 古靈精怪嘛. So, as the Chinese in Macau never follow the construction manual of the Song Dynasty or the Ming or the Qing, The Westerners here also that never follow the characteristic of Vitruvius, you know, the classical order and so on. They are 自由發揮. They like to, okay. So this house in Bak Ma Hong, as you can see, this column is wrong. The proportion is wrong. As you know, column is a proportion of a human being, human body, being the capital related to the head, and this the body. So there are rules. There are, okay. The architect designed it. This is Antonio Lima Mateos, a very important architect in Macau. He did a lot of in Macau. And then the workmen, the laborers decide about that. So this is ridiculous, but so beautiful. Even this, the proportion is wrong completely. It's too flat. So this is another characteristic of Macau, this sweetness. These are not volumes. They are years. They change into years. And the column, they should never be cylinder. They have, it's a conical, exquisite shapes, okay? So this is even ridiculous, you see? No proportion at all, but so beautiful, so sweet. If you ask one of us as a trained architect, we will not do this. We are not able to do this because intellectually we don't accept this. But after 100 years, we said, this is fantastic. I wonder I should do it like that. This is freestyle. You see, this facade is completely bizarre. All follow the San Malo. This one opened so much just to show off to Dao Sangyi. And then you see this topping. This is a neo-Manueline style. 文藝復興 in Portugal 有一個皇帝叫做 Manuel. But this is quite insolite, bizarre. This is even bizarre, as you know. The neoclassic has the mask of the Greek theatre. 開心啊、苦啊、嬲啊、笑啊, okay, called the theatre mask of the Greek. 嗰個工人唔識做啊嘛, the labor doesn't understand what is that, and then he do in plaster this skull. Okay, 你唔明白係乜嘢? Before, all the houses has a plaque with the Jiangji to show that there's water there. In case of fire, the fireman goes inside. All house has this, the number and then the Jiangji. So something was missed here, and the labor say, 哇，做乜嘢啊嗰時？點鬼知啊？做一個Jiangji，斜一斜佢。So it's fantastic. This is 古靈精怪, bizarre. A lot of 古靈精怪. And this designed by a famous architect. So the founder of Macau School. This is all Macau School. Everything is well proportioned. This guy is called Alexandrino de Melo. He was the owner of Igaga Jingfu Zhongbo. So all very well designed, you see. But then the what's the name? The drainage, okay? He didn't design, and the labor put a pork there, a pig. You see, it's amazing. Maybe you never realize. In Macau, you look at the details, you will find a lot of funny things. Further details. This is typically Chinese. You top a building with the protector. This is not the same. This was the founder of Yanjitong, Holy House of Mercy, and the first bishop of Macau, Company of Jesus. So they are Macanese, but they put it here. It was removed only a few years ago. Amazing. Another very amazing thing is this double column. They are symbolic and with non-registered orders. You can see this is very freestyle. This was designed by a guy with significant work here also. Jose Marie, I forgot his name, JM Casuso. And this is amazing, the Portuguese with the Chinese, the symbol of the king that was removed after the Republic. So I already mentioned this. Okay, very typical of Macau architecture, the urns. Okay, a lot of building has this topic. It was all destroyed. And when people renew one, if you put some of these, people will criticize you. It's wrong. It is true. It exists. These people doesn't know, so they criticize. Ignorance is very daring. If you are a knowledgeable people, we have to educate them. Also, very Ling Nam Pai, in a very Portuguese house, it's the piping for the water. They cover it with plaster with this so simple, but then you have some very well elaborate. This I show already the mixture of several architecture, right? Okay, another characteristic of our architecture, bioclimatic design. So this is a typical section of a middle-class house, not rich people, middle class. You have the platform, you already see. You have the 2-story, you have the false ceiling, and you have 2 galleries or loggias or porticos. So the average of Macau runs from 3.2, 3.4 to 4.3 floor to floor. The average of the platform, and I surveyed a lot of them, 1.3. Okay. So you have ventilation in the roof, as I show you, and the ventilation on the walls, remember? Through the false ceiling, you can call it, this is the air box. Also here and underneath. This is mainly for humidity. Being these two also for humidity. And if the house is well built, they fill this with charcoal, tan, because tan is a hydrofugen material, absorb humidity. On the other way, the white termite hates charcoal. They run from the charcoal. And with the loggia, it's very clever because theoretically, the sun in summertime, they are coming theoretically 45 degrees. So the gallery is dimensioned to defend the house not to be hot. But during winter time, the sun moved down to 25, 27. So it reached the house inside, make it warm. And the charcoal here, and mainly in the upper floor, the charcoal keeps some heat until the night. So these people were very clever. They know how to build. We don't. Nowadays, a lot of young people doesn't know. As you know, if you talk to high-tech people of solar energy and bioarchitecture, 40 to 60% of, how can I say, bioarchitecture is low-tech. 40% is high-tech. You know, the house, some of the old house, there is, we call it a flat window, up in the floor, up in the door. You opened it, the whole house was fresh, was amazing, you know. what happens? These all have more movement. Okay, so there's the charcoal. I talked already. And if you add not everlasting tree in front of your house, you have a perfect bioclimatic architecture, because during summer it's full of green. During summer it has no leaves, so in the summer they protect from the sun too much exposition. In the winter, okay, okay. So in winter, you have this. They let the sun blessing come, okay, to the house. This is another example. I already talked about the louvers. It's fantastic. This is in Rua do Campo. I was going there because the building was going to be destroyed. It's today Asia Delta Bank. So you have a Western door, you have a sliding Chinese door, okay? And then you have one more here. Yes, but there is, okay. This is facing Holland. This is also in influence of Baba culture of Malaysia, Maya. You find these in Sekei as well, all destroyed, unfortunately. All in timber, very beautiful. So Xinjiang San House is beautiful, with a huge, elegant staircase. This is all Xinjiang San House. And the last slide is the Palacio de Praia Grande, the palace, the actual government Jombo. Unfortunately, the interiors were destroyed. It was done by PWD, an architect, a young architect who doesn't know about this. And when I enter this Jombo, I don't feel like being in a centurial house. It's so vulgar. The decoration are so ugly, so copy and paste, you know. This was as it was, you see, full of Chinese things. I don't know where are them. The Portuguese didn't bring this. Even these, all Qing dynasty, you see? You see the door, Portuguese with these Chinese things, beautiful. Okay, we move to 1990s. We don't have time. What shall I do? We stop here? Okay. So I cannot talk about reuse. If people are interested, we do one more in reuse, okay? So I talk about this up to the 60s, and the reusage architecture we will do in another webinar, if you like, okay? So I point out these four important architects after those two mechanists. They were mechanists. They were Portuguese born in Macau, but these are all Portuguese and one English, John Lennon. And in his time, he exhibited full of pride. Architect registered in RIB, British Royal Institute of British Architects. Okay. Oh, wrong. Okay. So this was designed by José Tomás Aquino. It's the official residence of Macau Chief Executive. It's a beautiful place and has a beautiful veranda. This one was designed, this was by me, the pavement, but this building was designed by J.M. Casusu. He did a lot of works to Macau Holy House. This is my practice, my office, and also the special. I redesigned the floor because it was all deteriorated. And this is the only place in Macau and maybe in the world that you have 3 materials and 3 ages. The Chinese slab, I brought it from demolition. The Portuguese pavement, basalt and vidraço, and the mechanism. I keep this. This came from the demolition of St. Lazarus. This was paved in 1903. So the 3 different material, I show you very fastly this. The United Nations University for Research in Macau. So these are all buildings of the early century, 1917, the precious blood of Christ. I renovate almost all of them. Puito School, this I renovate this also. This one, okay, but we move fast. So we have 1920s to 50s. Gastão Borges, a local guy, Júlio Alberto Basto, one of the famous important architecture. He's the author of so many beautiful tropical deco buildings. João Canavarro Nolasco, trained as a civil engineer, a mechanist, did beautiful modernistic building. Francisco and Carlos, forgot here, Carlos Rebelo de Andrade, 2 architects, 2 brothers from Porto. They did fantastic job. Chanquan Pui, who did work with Júlio Alberto Basto, and before with José Francisco. He was neoclassic and he became a fantastic designer when he started the modernism. Antonio Lei, father of José Lei Mencam. Antonio Lei came from Guangdong as civil engineer, but the Portuguese government didn't accept his credentials, so he was a draftsman in PWD. So these houses are from the early last century. This is a very old building. It is built before 1894 because there's the pictures of 1894 that show this beautiful house. Today is the Sir Robert Ho-Chong Library, Chinese library. This is all building of the 20s. Fortunately, I was commissioned to renew this building. The inside's no good. It will become nursery for children of high level. A lot of gardens. I can put there my grandchildren. European Institute of Macau. Now it's paint red, right? So here, a lot of people ask me, what kind of house is this? This is estilo casa portuguesa. It is style of Portuguese house. Casa means house. Portuguesa means Portuguese. So it's typically Chinese Portuguese house. And the Chinese love it very much. In Portugal, Raulino, you see, this is beautiful, and this is Chinese Art Deco, beautiful. You know, Portuguese like the azulejo, the blue glaze tiles, you see. And you see, this is beautiful. So this guy Raulino, he studied in Lisbon and in Portugal and in Germany. He was a great defender of the Manmat in Portugal. Modernism was coming in through Europe, and in a certain stand, he was a reactionary, saying that no modernism, we have to save our roots. So he was considered to be not avant-garde, not modern. But as a matter of fact, he was a very clever man, very competent. He was professor of architecture. He built beautiful houses, inspired in the outskirts of Lisbon. He built a lot. And there were so many followers in Macau, Brazil, Angola, and so on. And in Macau, he has a guy who was the director of Comoco. Gaston Borges was Portuguese style, because this style you will not find in other places. The Saibanga Signa is another thing. It is a bizarre transformation in Mekong, you know. So we move fast. So this is a neoclassic out of time. Chan Quan Pui helped Carl rebuild the Dran, but this was not designed by Chan Quan Pui. He was a draftsman. And of course, he was not skilled enough to do this. It was this guy from Porto. But don't talk so much about this, because Chan Quan Pui is much better as a modernist than the post office, because the post office is out of time. Opened in 1930, so completely out of time, okay? So show you some Art Deco and pre-modernist, beautiful these. I know this Souza family. They were pharmacists and very good friends of my family. I go in Gaia, beautiful house. This tropical deco, close to here, Mantai Gaia. Beautiful, you see, Chinese and Portuguese, you know. So this is a good example of Art Deco. This was designed by a Portuguese architect, José da Costa Vilaça, in 1933. And of course, this beautiful Honkaisi by Júlio Alberto Bastos. Skyline still exists, beautiful, but someday it will be destroyed. This is the best you can find, not in Macau, in Asia. You go to Japan, it's not so easy to find it. And this is typically Macau, because Macau tropical deco don't use expensive material, marbles, gold, and so ivory, like you have in Chrysler building in New York, even in Empire State Building, or in Europe, you know. Everything is beautiful, everything is very simple. You see this addition, beautiful. Beautiful school. Like, you know, modernism means ocean liner, means radio. So this is inspired in ocean liner and so on. It was renewed, unfortunately, adding agriculture. This is a fantastic building by Calavarro Lasco, who was an engineer by training, right? And Chen Quan Pui and Júlio Alberto Bastos. The school, oh, go back so much, crazy rats. Oh, okay, this is beautiful. Art Deco, okay? 包市估到靚㗎，而家改晒啦。These few house, modernistic house behind Santiago are beautiful too. And this beautiful building in 1936, I took those slides in 78 when I was in Europe. I came in holiday. And you see the color, how modern and beautiful. This building was designed by Pedro Hui. But then the church, again, with its bad taste, covered this with Shanghai plaster. Beautiful, simple, you see? So I move for, okay, this is another beautiful thing. We have to collect 500 signatures to make it list as heritage. This is beautiful in Peña Hill. It's a modernist. You see the colors, very subtle, simple. This is yellow Shanghai plaster. The railing, everything's beautiful. 紅色, 黃色, beautiful. This is one of the most beautiful. Chen Guanpui after Alberto Bastos. So the Portuguese house designed by Lei Menkam. This is very beautiful. I never find the name of this guy. 1951. He's still here. So this you know well. This is destroyed, unfortunately. Beautiful modernism and fascism, the official style of Salazar, the Portuguese dictator. This still exists, beautiful. So the original hospital, 1951, and my school, Liceu Nacional Infante do Henrique, beautiful. The men were separated of the girl, very rigid. We have several, where is China Bank? The whole lot is our school, and Liceu. This is a beautiful house. Bisenei live here. I don't know who designed it. I couldn't find it. And with this, I think I finish because, but this will be for the next, okay? Yes, this is 60s, okay? Thank you for your attention. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that was a very, very high-speed train that we traveled through time, Courage, from many, many centuries and decades. And with your expression and detailed analysis of the mix of Portuguese, Chinese, South Asia architecture and different characteristic elements from Goa, South Asia, Persian, India, Malaysia, Philippines, well, you name it all, and the colors of Macau. One thing I really got inspired is the interpretation of heritage architects through the different period and how it actually preserved through different understanding. I will have lots more questions, and that's my weekend activity, to walk around Macau to appreciate all this beautiful architecture. But before, well, I would like to save all this time to our floors and our guests, and now I would like to invite HKIA. Maybe you guys can start with the first question.
Yeah, thank you, Christine, and thanks, Professor Carlos, for the wonderful sharing tonight. I also invite our members, also conservation architect Tony Lam, hello on stage, and also he has some questions to Professor.
Yes, I think I appreciate that Macau has a lot of heritage building from different periods of time. But will it be have the same problem as Hong Kong, that they will be demolished very soon? So that's my first question. There's the risk of demolition of all those maybe a lot of historical buildings, especially the 1950s and 60s buildings, because of the redevelopment.
Okay, I should answer here or there.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
They will see both.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay.
No.
They can see both.
Fortunately,
In Macau, we have regulations since 1983, and the new safeguard heritage law bill was approved in 2014, and they are council, a governmental council for the cultural heritage preservation. On the other hand, there are a few and very dynamic private associations regarding the safeguard of heritage. Unfortunately, they are not governmental, and they are very dynamic on time to stop some of the situation. And they have been quite successful. And of course, we have AAM, and also scholars and architects and engineers that want to safeguard. But the best thing, that happens is that during SAR, the conscience of the youngsters regarding the heritage is much stronger. I have been involved in heritage from lawmaking to practicism to teaching since I was 26 years old in 1983. And I can tell you, during the Portuguese administration, a lot of buildings and the first law was enforced in the early 80s. In 1991, in Hong Kong, there was a heritage debate by the Board of Historic Buildings and Relics. I remember guys like Professor David Long, others, I forgot the name. And the governor was Sir Edward Youde. And the last combat that the heritage was losing was the Western market. So the whole member of the Heritage Committee, this board of historic and relics, they asked for the resignation. Sir Edward Youde was so touched that he moved himself to safeguard the Western market. And Western market still exists. Fortunately, in Macau, there were a lot of pressure of the developers because they consider those buildings very bad. A shame for Macau, saving those buildings. We have to destroy to build high. And the Portuguese did a lot to preserve them, but didn't have a policy to educate through the schools the youngsters. Fortunately, the Chinese administration, so Macau SAR, invest a lot in the education of people. And now, if you touch some heritage, the civil society will be against this position to defend it. And young people are very strong in this sense of belonging regarding heritage, not before. Before the civil society was against the preservation, because they say, if you want to keep the memories of Portugal, go back to Portugal to keep it. Of course, this is wrong, right? But hopefully, there are regulations more advanced and earlier than in Hong Kong. I lectured in Hong Kong for several times, long years, and I also participate in several seminars, pre-SAR, post, during Hong Kong SAR, and I know what you have been doing, which is much better than before, much better after all. Did I answer the question?
Yeah. Open to other people.
Hi, Professor. I can see the design of the bioclimatic in the Portuguese building or the foreign design building. Is it only for the building in South China, or actually even in Portugal, the building also have bioclimatic design like
that? What specifically the balcony? Which one? Which one? Ah, okay. Okay. No, the bioclimatic, there are items that are European, Portuguese, but only a few. Because in Portugal, in Europe, West Mediterranean and South, Portugal, Spain, Italy, South France, half of the temperature is fantastic. No humidity. When the sun, you cannot be under the sun, it will burn you. But if you are under a tree, there's a fresh breeze from the sea. So a lot of this problem, you don't have it in Europe. Humidity. People doesn't know how to, Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, they don't know how to deal with humidity. So in Macau, a lot of people make several experiences, from Chinese to Malay, Indian, Filipinos, Indonesia, before called Java or Hasheng. And these two guys, which were mechanists, they are Portuguese born in Macau. Okay, one born in Macau, the other born in Cochinchina, so Vietnam, before Vietnam, okay? So, but one studied in Portugal, one studied in England. So they have the sense of belonging to understand this, and they speak Cantonese, Portuguese, English, and French. So they mix these techniques in a conscious way, and they do the school. And they were imitated in Hong Kong, in Xiamen, Guangdong, in Bangkok. There are some, they call it Portuguese architecture. It's a mixture. So this bioclimatic, it is a very specific phenomenon of us, this part of the world, Southeast, not Portugal, because they don't have this problem.
So it's
We
like,
have, and we have to solve them.
so it's like this mixture, right?
Shall we open the question to the guests on the floor here?
There's no in the internet.
Oh, there is a lot.
Oops, hang on.
Answer them now.
Okay, so
May I ask the question? Firstly, thank you, Carlos. Hats off to you for consolidating 463 years of architectural history into 3 hours. I guess my question is like the term, as you said, Portuguese architecture seems to be including a lot of European influences in Macau. It's not like a distinctive style on its own. It's a mixture of perhaps like Moorish style in the earlier period, and maybe in the later days, Italian. And to me, it seems like a combination of styles in the Mediterranean countries, okay, of Europe. So I guess to what extent do you think such influences has been adopted in Lingnan style architecture of Macau? Like, is there a particular successful MediterrAsian project in Macau that demonstrates this assimilation?
Okay, Jimmy, thank you for your question. Okay, if we talk about until medieval time, there were proper production of architecture in Europe. But after the Renaissance, Gothic and Renaissance especially, they melt. There's a fusion of style. What you find in Italy, more or same you find it in Spain and in Portugal, or even in France or England. So the style of movement with people adhering all around Europe. So when you talk about neoclassic, you may think about the French neoclassic. But there's a specific, more specific of Portugal. And what you find in Macau, it's linked to Portugal much more than to France or in England. But in Hong Kong, if you see St. John Church or Cathedral, they are linked to the neo-Gothic, which is very British. And you understand, in Hong Kong, the British bring their architecture. They didn't melt. Oh, I want my house like the one I have in Japan, and bring to Hong Kong. In Macau, no, you mix. And I think this generates much quality. So sometime when some authors talk about the Greek, the Roman, about Macau, that is ridiculous. We don't need to go so far. We are only 500 years old. It's a long time, but it's very short. The Hellenistic, Greek Roman, it's 2,000 years. Come on, let us be more realistic, okay? The Lingnan Pai, there's a region, a big region you know better than me, from Guangzhou to this area, and especially in Qing Dynasty, from literature to painting, and then architecture, The intellectual moved to Kyoto, they moved to Japan, they moved to other places, and they like the Western design in architecture, and they adapt to the Chinese in the rigidity period, as scholar Yang described, right? We are in the rigidity period. But this is, of course, influenced by Macau as well, because these all reach China through Macau. And don't forget, that the company of Jesus, the sage like Matthias Ricci, Leonardo, Joseph Castiglione, Lang Xining, they were top Beijing Imperial Court president of the mathematics tribunal, Matthias Ricci, or the guy who was the imperial painter, Lang Xining. Lang Xining was Italian, but they all passed through Portugal and Macau before going to China. So naturally, they bring Portuguese influence to China, but not the south, the center of the Chinese Empire, Beijing. But okay, some of these maybe we cannot prove. It doesn't matter. We look at the recent 100, 150, 200 years, and they are vibrant. They are a vibrant example to further research. Okay? Lingnan Pai is not ours. We belong to Lingnan Pai. We are part of Lingnan Pai. That's true, for sure. But Macau School of this mixed hybrid East and West, we can reclaim for us as our, indeed.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's have some questions from online. So you've mentioned few Macanese Portuguese architects. I wonder if there's have been like a movement or specific school of style in Macau that reflects the architectural culture.
But when? Before or actually? Oh, 16th century? No, it was a mixture of architecture, already answered, but in a spontaneous way. You have things that you cannot find in China or elsewhere, you only find in Macau, and you can see up to the 19th century, early 19th century, first half of the 19th century, in the paintings of George Chinnery. He sketched so much Macau, and you will see a very typical architecture, which moved from very Portuguese local to the Chinese, and then some mixture example, but not in a conscious way. The school of Macau with conscience, mixing theory, history, belief, feng shui, feng shui, and even techniques of construction was the Macau school in 1850.
Okay, let's combine the last two questions together. So I see our friends are quite concerned with some of the really beautiful buildings and architecture that you show through the presentation are actually not listed as heritage architecture, and they're concerned that how do we stop it from preventing the user or the client to transform it into something, or even worse, demolishing. And is there a school in Macau that have a conservation heritage program and training program? And from a question from myself is, there is so much Macau has been doing to preserve and adapt all this heritage architecture. What will be the main key for as a priority for Macau at this stage? You say, would it be like preservation, for example, you show about the 500 listed signature, or it will be setting up a standard system of preservation of heritage architecture, or heritage architect even listed as some other countries?
Yes, you are right. So there are only one school of architecture in Macau, USJ, St. Joseph University, and I think Mas is going also to do a school
Doctor and master, yeah.
in architecture. So Macau University of Science and Technology. Their level, I'm linked to two universities here. I'm curator, but I keep on suggesting the improvement of the architectural teaching in Macau, because the level is not yet the level I think it is important. And with a speciality in the heritage preservation. This is one thing. The other thing is also preparing during the secondary school, up to Gozhong, the history of Macau that people are not studying. They have to study universal history, national history, and history of Macau, and also give them, since they are young, the sense of belonging regarding these issues. Okay, this is very important, because the citizen, some are very aware of the heritage issues, and hopefully the young people, you see. Finally, the safeguard regulation in Macau accept that with 500 signature of local residents, you can propose a building or a site to be listed by the government. Of course, the last decision is governmental, but you can propose to them. That is good. So I start and I find a channel with my colleagues to appeal for your conscience or something. I start a petition of 500 signature. I already have more than 300 to list the old bridge of Macau, which is beautiful. I can show you the picture. It's at the end of the 60s. So it's for here. To list it as a heritage building, because it is nice. It's very nice. It was designed in the 60s. With very little money, Macau was always waiting for the decision of the minister of the Ministry of the Colonies. It takes a long time. Okay. So this is the bridge. You see? Beautiful bridge. It was designed by Professor Edgar Cardoso. He is passed away. He was a professor of civil engineering, and Portuguese civil engineering is famous. The school ISD, you know, right? It's famous, and he was designing and building a bridge in Japan, in all Europe, Latin America, and Africa. And in Macau, he designed this bridge. Very low cost honorarium and very low cost construction. This building load, dynamic load, is only for 400 kilometers square meters, so very low, not good, so good for the cars for so many years. And already served Macau since 1970. So it must be listed as a Macau heritage, and after that, to be transformed in a public garden. The longest garden maybe in the world, because it's narrow, 10 meters by 2 kilometers. So we add 0.5% in our town planning open space. We only have in the new, under public discussion, new master plan, we only have 8% of open space. So with this bridge, we add 0.5. Not bad, not bad. So 500 signature is not very easy. but it's not so difficult. So I count on you, those guys who are in this webinar, the friends of Macau, in Hong Kong too, because I have guys from Portugal, from Italy, from Germany, from England, that know Macau. They are scholar, architects, historians. They are signing the list as well. So I hope Hong Kong colleagues can help us to sign the list. I promise you that Christine tomorrow will send you some list and with the brief, historical brief of the bridge, okay? And it is very beautiful. If you can see, Macau wasn't like that. Was the low hill colony, the city of the 7 Hill Islands, in Macau City. So he started with the bridge by a very flat road on the river, moving up only in the center, giving this funny, strange, this bizarre optical illusion. And then the whole cityscape of Macau was preserved. He was a great architect, being a civil engineering professor. So this must be preserved as historical heritage of Macau, because the law enforces us with this power.
Oh, you have, okay, we have one more question. Let's answer. It's getting late, but yeah, let's
And
keep
we are
starving. Yes, I haven't had dinner. You食嘢啊？唔係食你嗰個葡撻。雲吞麵 Okay, let's have a last question from the floor.
Thank you, Professor Carlos, for giving a very interesting perspective on Macau. We were actually looking for advice as young architects in Macau, because in the coming years, there's definitely more and more high-rise buildings coming up. And from this lesson, we learned about all the beautiful things about building making in Macau, and about clinical things, ideas. How do we adopt those principles that we learn from here to a new high-rise or new architecture building in coming future in Macau, especially in urban design? How do you make urban design a Macauish urban design, not an international grid system? So I want to ask your advice and your perspective on those two things.
I was sharing, thank you, good question. I was going to share you some architectural design, modern, contemporary, but inspired in heritage, both Chinese and Portuguese, but there's no time. If possible in the future, I can organize one of these lessons, lecture. Okay, regarding your question, I answer you first. I was long-time member of the heritage, also heritage, but the environmental committee since Portuguese time. I was almost, 15 years. And one suggestion I have given to the committee, and everybody say very good, clap their hands, but did nothing. The secretary was Lausilio. Was what? Was for all the buildings modern in Macau, we should put 2 slabs on the top, not only one. You know, in Macau, there's the fifth essence Macau on the top of the roof. Why? The guy who buy the last floor, he lives there and build the illegal structure on the terrace by brick or just hand, sink it, to be a human shell of themselves. So they have that construction to protect them. And hire, rent those rooftop zinc can structure to the guys who are guardian here coming from Dubai. That is unhuman. So they use human shell to protect themselves. Those more human, more humane, they put a lot of trees and plants. Okay. But there's a solution. When you build, you add one more slab of 20 cm, giving a box. I did it in Tapsiak, that building with the copper, and it functioned very well. First, infiltration. Second, noise. Third, and above all, keep the building quite cool. Okay? Another thing you can do in modern architecture, and that is low-tech that function. The floor-to-floor should not be 2.7. If you do it 3.2, you pay more money. But the houses in Macau cost 20 million, 30, 50, 100 million. So you add half a meter, and you have the flat window on the top of the door. The door are 2, more or less, okay? The void less than 2, 2.1. Then you still have 40. Or simply, with 2.7, you can make a flat slab, not the 50 centimeters beam.
Yeah.
But the people are lazy in Macau. They don't want to think about that. And the governmental department, so if you make a flat, you can ventilate. The house can be slightly moved up, use a basement, a cave. So there are several things. And of course, in Milano, you have the famous case, Bosco Verticale, the vertical wood, right? Full of trees. You cannot do it in Macau because of the mosquitoes and so on. But you have other ways. For instance, if you have a blind wall, a gable wall close, you can put a timer linked to a tube dropping water. This is very low tech and very simple. In this gable, you have water showering 2 minutes every hour during daytime. Then the whole blind gable will be refreshed. So very simple solution. But you want to do it or not? That is the question.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Once again, Professor Karush, and thank you everyone from Hong Kong, Macau, and around the globe for joining us tonight. I'm sure you have many more questions. Email to us, we'll forward to, and we'll have another session. And once again, I would like to remind about the copyright disclaimer, 版權聲明. So all materials, please, let's protect everyone's individual copyright, not to be used without reference and consent from the author. 咁希望所有人尊重我哋著作權，咁就唔好用任何嘅相片啊，或者傳播啊，或者修改啊，沒有當事人同意之下啦。Okay, thank you everyone. A very successful event, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
And thank you HKIA.
Thank you, HKIA as well.
Have a good evening, everybody. See you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
刪咗。
哦，就得。